So good evening. I was just thinking about the conversations that we've been having this evening, and I do believe we're incredibly privileged to be here tonight. For a variety of reasons, listening to the speakers, but also because we're at this point in time where the acceleration and the progress of technology is off the charts. It's accessible and it's affordable. So we're living in this constant state of shock and awe, where we're able to use these technologies to solve problems in inconceivable ways. And so these technologies, many of them, or these exponential technologies, offer immediate and tangible benefits, right? A couple of examples, top right of the screen, 3D printing of bone substitutes. Bottom left of the screen, 4D magnetic robots to do cardiovascular repairs inside the body and then dissolves inside the body when done. At the center of the screen, a phenomenal company that monitors the changes of the tone of your voice, and then based on those changes can predict your heart attack a couple of hours before it happens, right? And then right through to basic stuff, such as the robots operating in some of our e-commerce factories or warehouses around the world that makes global e-commerce affordable and so efficient that it feels like it's a store just around the corner. On the opposite side of the spectrum, we've also got other technologies that are really cool. It shows how smart the inventor was, but it adds no value into our environment. So the self-solving Rubik's Cube defeats the purpose of the Rubik's Cube, right? It is like a self-licking ice cream. And the reason I share this with you is that a lot of conversations I'm having with organizations around the world is when to invest into technology that makes sense and when not to. So I take them through this value formula, and the formula's got two sides to it, and in order to progress into investment, you've got to tick both sides of the formula. So the left side says that you've got to look for evidence that the capex of the machine is cheaper than the opex of the human. The right side of the formula speaks to the three digital dividends, and I believe there's broadly only three digital dividends, irrespective of how complicated the smart people try and make it sound. But the dividends are the G, the P, and the X. Exponential growth, in other words, leveraging these technologies to innovate new products and services to create revenues never seen before. The P is exponential productivity, in other words, leveraging these same technologies to reduce the cost of doing business inside your organization. Because if you're the lowest cost producer, specifically in economic times that we're experiencing, you will typically be a winner. It's a golden rule of strategy, be the lowest cost producer. And then the X is changing the experience that your customers have with your organization. And that's critically important for most industries, because most industries have commoditized. Their products are more or less the same. The difference between one product and the other is the experience you have in dealing with their products. So a good experience means that people come back, stay longer, spend more, and tell other people about it. So you've got to tick the left side of the screen and then look for at least one of those dividends. And if you can tick both sides, then you've achieved proper exponential value. Now, if I bring you back to the left side of the screen and we contemplate this construct of comparing the capex of the machine with the opex of the human, what I'm talking about is labor replacing technologies or labor mitigating technologies. And this creates a lot of anxiety. We start thinking about what it means for jobs. It's very emotional. I mean, our jobs provide our relevance. It's how we sustain ourselves. We get a lot of our psychological pleasure from our jobs. And the conversation becomes more emotive when you think about your kids or the people that you're responsible for. How are they going to navigate through this new world? Up until now, every time we think about jobs, we think, well, just that blue-collar workers really got it tough, eh? But now we're experiencing this thing, this construct called the Moravich paradox that says that these exponential technologies are it's easier for them to replace the jobs of the people in this room, the highly functioning cognitive jobs of the actuary and the radiologist, compared to the physical jobs of the farm worker that has to pull the strawberry off the plant. So this conversation pulls all of us onto the same platform around job security. Now, if you take 150 years of economic data and you normalize it for events that have taken place around the world and in specific countries, you'll realize that this conversation has been going on for a long time. In actual fact, what I want to highlight here is that the media takes these conversations and they blow it up. And as humans, we like the hype. We don't like pragmatic, progressive solutions. But the 150 years of economic data normalized for events that have taken place shows that this is not a new conversation, all right? And if you go back those 100 years, what stands out is that every time laborers have tried to fight the machines that they thought were going to take their jobs away, the machines have always won. because the economics of the machine always wins. So in this instance, where the whole world is progressing, it's futile to resist this change because the world is going to progress. And if you take that same amount of economic data, what it shows is that industries and economies that adopted technology and innovation behaved like that orange line. They accelerated economically, and there was economic prosperity for everyone involved. Whereas industries and economies that resisted that change typically experience economic retardation, and the population suffers. So we've got to get over this conversation that technology is going to take our jobs away. Right? There's enough evidence and mature research that's coming to the fore that says otherwise. World Economic Forum says for every job we lose, we're going to find 1.74 new jobs. PwC, the people in this building, say for every job we lose, we'll create 1.2 jobs. My organization did research in the UK that says over the last 20 years, for every job that was lost to technology, 4 were created. And Enrico Moravetti, in his book, The Geography of Jobs, shows that for every low-skilled job that gets lost, we lose an additional 1.6 jobs, service jobs. But for every new technology job we create 5 service jobs. So the secondary and tertiary effects of technology being infused in the economy is really positive. So we're not having a technology crisis, we're having a leadership crisis. The challenge is that as business leaders and as political leaders, we need to make decisions to progress. We need to educate ourselves and move forward because the world is progressing. If we refuse to, we're just going to go off a cliff. What we need to think about is the time horizon between the introduction of the technology and that point where it starts having positive effects in the economy. So you're not going to introduce the technology and miraculously all the jobs get created. We have to expand the performance of those organizations and economies to get that benefit. And that is that time horizon is a thing called Engel's pause. It was defined or described for the first time during the first industrial revolution, when things started mechanizing. Typically people lost their jobs, and it took almost 50 years before people came out of that job loss and started experiencing prosperity. That's called the Engel's pause. And it's quite interesting because we can bring it to today, and we can maybe refer to it as digital Engel's pause. We need to figure out how do we reduce that time horizon between the introduction of these new exponential technologies and how we extract value and benefit from it. So we've got to focus on that readiness. Now, every single large organization with proper leadership is thinking about this future of work. They're thinking about the workplace, what kind of work are we going to do, and what does a workforce look like. And the conversation becomes very complicated. It looks like something like that. I'm not going to go into all this detail. We're trying to do more with time. We're looking at new workforce ecosystems where jobs are being disconnected from work, and jobs and work are being disconnected from companies, and companies are becoming platforms. Right? We're moving into an environment where the workforce is connected, where we're monitoring the organization and the organization is monitoring us. We're still getting generational theory wrong in many instances, but I want to focus on that lifelong learning. Right? Our knowledge currently is decaying at a rate of about 30% a year. So that means you take your CV, and anything in your CV older than 3 years, pull it out and throw it away, because it's not going to help you get your next job. That's the reality. So it's up to you to remain relevant by constantly learning and improving your knowledge base. The other thing is that we've always pushed deep technical skills, and now we're in the world that wants hybrid skills. Doesn't mean that you average in 2 skills, it means that you're equally deep in 2 skills. I'm a doctor that understands AI, an engineer that understands robotics, an architect that gets IoT. And then if we want to compete in this world of robots, we talk about STEM in a very vanilla way. We need to compete as humans against robots. So we need to move away from STEM and bring our best, well, we need to broaden STEM and bring the best human qualities to the fore, which is compassion, empathy, articulation, storytelling, and work on creating STEMpathy. And research done with the Harvard University, it shows that, if I put up this graph, the y-axis is represents social skills, the x-axis represents mathematical skills. The gray dots are jobs that are static, the blue dots are jobs that are in decline, the green dots are jobs that are on the increase. Note how all the green dots are above the 50th percentile of social skills, and the blue jobs are below the 50th percentile of social skills. Now, this doesn't mean go out and have lots of parties, etc. This means about interacting with your fellow human, so caregivers, care workers, etc. All right, so a deep focus on STEMpathy. And then one other thing I want to focus off that is this construct of sustainability. We've spoken about standing up as a nation and taking our responsibility in society far more serious. And so I refer to this as Nordic exceptionalism, where we don't just think about our own progress. We take into account that society has to progress with us. It's pointless having successful modern organizations in a society that's struggling to just get by on a day-to-day basis. And so we'll understand this, that while we're thinking about modern workplaces, etc., some individuals want a job, any kind of job, as long as it's got some form of income and it's predictable, and they probably will compromise on dignity. That's how bad things are. This problem is big worldwide. So if we look around the world, currently we're looking at about 600 million people that are living in extreme poverty. And extreme poverty means $2 a day in South Africa, $20 a day in the US. But the good news is that people are escaping poverty currently at a rate of 0.5 people per second. We need to be at a 1.8 to solve global poverty, but it's still positive. So people are escaping poverty at a rate of 0.5 people per second around the world. If we zone into South Africa, just have a look at the stat on the bottom right side of the screen. We are adding people into poverty at a rate of 0.1 people per minute. Now, that doesn't sound like a lot, but work out how many people we're adding into poverty every hour. During the 2 hours that we've spent together, 6.5 South Africans have entered poverty in that time frame. So we've got 0.8% of the world's population, and we've got 3.5% of the world's unemployed in South Africa. And this is why we are the most unequal country and society in the world. Now, we can debate this the entire night as to the causes and how we solve it, but this is what the people want. So in surveys done across African countries, 34 African countries, and you ask people, what is it that you want from your government? They'll say, jobs. Number one priority. Then they ask for health, infrastructure, etc. If you ask them differently, which SDG do you want solved for? They'll say, number 8, please. Decent work and economic growth. And so what we have is 1 in every 3 Africans are self-employed because there's no jobs. Versus 1 in every 6 Americans and 1 in every 20 Germans. So one could say, well, that's bad. I see an opportunity there because it means that we've got this entrepreneurial trait in us. And so I believe that the future of work is probably some form of self-employment. And I refer to this as the rise of the micro-entrepreneur. These are the individuals that don't invent the technology. They don't have education and skills like we do, etc. Many of them won't have gone to school, but they can access the platform in order to create their own sustainability, economic sustainability. And there's 3 broad categories that I want to cover with you. One is distributed value chains, in which I can trade in my free time and my service and my skill. And that skill could be reading, it could be driving a car, it could be punching a nail into a wall. Collaborative consumption speaks to the sharing of assets in communities for the benefit of the community and the benefit of the entrepreneur. And digital catalyst refers to taking industries that were once very popular, but due to the lack of transparency, trust, and locality, they've lost their effect. Or it's industries that we're able to service now because we have become digital. So if you take the human component of community, you add technology, what you're doing is you're creating trust, reliability, and transparency. So let me share with you some examples. In the world of distributed value chains, these are some of my favorite companies. DoorDash, valued at just over $500 million, employs 600,000 people around the world. That's e-commerce with a spin. You place your order, they go shop for your stuff in the store. Not only have you created employment, but they're keeping the local grocer going. In South Africa, we've got a version of that called One Cart. Right? You've got WAG and Rover that connects people with pets that need support for their pets to be looked after with individuals that have got free time and they've got the skill of walking. Right? And these individuals, normalized for exchange rates and inflation, etc., would earn 5 times minimum wage in our country. You've got the likes of Ilova that have distributed the growing of the sugarcane to local communities, and companies like Sweep South that have created 15,000 jobs, and the people that work for them earn more, have benefits, and they work in a far safer environment. So those organizations have created 1 million jobs in a very simple way. For people that typically don't have skills. Sweep South has created 15,000 jobs with 150 million rands worth of investment. They've created a job, every job has cost them 10,000 rand. It's the most effective job creation initiative we've had in the country. My team's created a business called ADX, which connected the poorest growers of vegetables to the rich restaurants in the big cities. And so typically someone that grows their tomatoes or their carrots or lettuce on a 20 or 30 square meter piece of land in Alex on the pavement will go sell it on the street side because they're excluded from the supply chain. Our ADX solution connected those individuals on a platform organized by entrepreneurs, use another set of entrepreneurs using another platform to take their produce to a central point where we cleaned it and checked it for quality, and another set of entrepreneurs distributed it into restaurants. So not only did we create economic relevance for that individual, but we gave them a digital identity. So Mehmood Yehi is no longer known as the lady that grows carrots. She's a 4 out of 5 rated carrot grower in her community. And she's now in the big supply chain that she was typically excluded from. In the world of collaborative consumption, this is the sharing of assets. Typically, a poor entrepreneur can't justify the ownership of the asset, but if they share it with the community, they can justify the ownership of that asset, and the community has the benefit of the asset as if they own it. And there's organizations like Hello Tractor and Trotro that distribute smart tractors. And then you've got the Gojeks and the Safe Boaters, which is a motorcycle version of Uber up in Africa. But I mean, and it doesn't have to be just transportation and mechanical equipment. In a Shiriki hub in Tanzania basically empowers entrepreneurs with the ability to generate power and create a Wi-Fi spot in small villages and communities. And so they sell connectivity and power by the second or by the minute. And if an elderly person or a woman applies for a franchise with Shiriki hub, they get it for free. Right? So this is expected to become a $330 billion market around the world. And the main beneficiaries from collaborative consumption are the youth, women, and the poor that we have on our continent. And then the final is digital catalyst. It's creating opportunities that wouldn't be possible if we didn't have digital, or reviving old industries. So most of you will know Livestock Invest. They've digitized the ownership of livestock in Labola. Stockfeller digitized the community savings scheme. You've got companies like Boomba.Mobi that use smart technology to do smart waste management and to prevent illegal dumping. I'm busy working with a bunch of young kids on Project Kuda, which is moving away from linking experts to jobs, but expertise to problems. And so their view is that maybe you just want someone that understands the cultural aspect of dealing in a small rural village. So get hold of that expertise off a digital platform. And a lady that works for me, developed Girl Code, which is empowering her to educate young girls that otherwise wouldn't have opportunities to teach, to be taught coding skills. So I'm incredibly optimistic about what lies ahead, and how we can create jobs from this technology that we're so fearful of. And so with that, I want to leave you with this thought that we are fearful that technology is going to take our jobs away. But it's only through technology that we're going to solve this massive unemployment problem that we have in our country. Thank you very much.